Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's dive right into one of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. What is reality really made of?
Okay, so think about this for a second. If you could break down everything around you, I'm talking about your phone, the air, the entire universe, what's the most fundamental thing at the bottom of it all? The ultimate building block?
Now, your first thought might be, well, it's an atom, right? Or maybe you'd go even deeper, down to quarks. Some of you might even say it's all just a field of energy, or those tiny little strings from string theory. And yeah, those are the usual suspects, the things we've always been told our universe is built on.
But what if that whole way of thinking is wrong? Not just the answers, but the question itself. What if the foundation of reality isn't a thing at all? What if it's a process?
And right there, that's where we find a crack in our normal way of seeing reality. We're about to move past this idea of a universe full of static objects and dive into a world that's built on something way more dynamic. So let's introduce a totally new fundamental unit. Let's call it interaction. Now, here's the mind-bending part. We normally think of two things bumping into each other, right? But this new way of looking at it says, no, the bumping into, the interaction itself, that's what comes first. Interaction is the primary unit of reality. And the things we see, they're just stable, repeating patterns that pop out of all that interacting.
Okay, so if interaction is our base ingredient, what are the rules of the game? Let's take a look at the foundational principles here. You can almost think of it as peeking at the universe's source code.
And, the logic is actually incredibly simple. It all starts with one thing we can't deny. Interaction occurs. I mean, if anything is happening at all, there's interaction. That's step one. Step two, anything that seems solid and persistent, like a rock or a planet or even you, is just a repeating pattern of interaction. It's a stable habit. And step three, every time these patterns interact, they create a kind of record, a little registration of that event. And that long chain of records, well, that's what we perceive as history. That's what feels like the flow of time.
So, how does this source code actually build the world we know? Well, it basically forces us to rethink, well, everything. It suggests that reality isn't made of nouns, it's made of verbs. It's a universe of doing, of happening, not just being.
Here's a simple way to think about it. The old way. You look at a coffee mug and it's a noun. It's an object. It just sits there. But in this new view, that mug is actually a verb. It's a mugging. It's a stable, ongoing process, a whole symphony of interactions that are constantly happening to maintain that shape and pattern. That's what makes it feel solid and real to us.
And what about something as fundamental as time? We love to think of it as a river that we're all floating down, right? But in this model, there is no river. Time is simply the ordered sequence of those records, those little stamps of interaction we just talked about. So time doesn't flow, it's built. One interaction, one record at a time. It's like building a ladder as you climb it. This means that identity isn't really about the stuff something is made of. It's all about stability. A pattern sticks around, and we give it a name, like a table or a person, simply because its pattern works. It's compatible with the whole web of other interactions happening around it. It just fits.
Okay, so this is all really fascinating, right? But a good model has to do more than just sound cool. It has to be useful. So let's put it to the test. Let's see how this interaction first idea deals with some of the biggest, oldest paradoxes in science and philosophy.
But first, we have to get this one key idea in our heads. A paradox doesn't mean reality is contradicting itself. It just means our understanding, our map of reality is wrong. A paradox is basically a big, flashing sign that says, hey, you're looking at this the wrong way. All right, let's start with a really famous one from quantum mechanics, the observer effect. You've probably heard of it. It's that super weird phenomenon where just looking at a particle seems to magically force it to choose a single state out of a whole wave of possibilities. Why does that happen? Well, the old model gets totally tangled up here because it thinks the observer is somehow special and separate from what's being observed. But what if an observer is just another complex pattern of interaction? And what if observation isn't some passive peak, but an active engagement? It's just another interaction. In that case, the so-called collapse of the wave function isn't some spooky, magical event. It's just the creation of a new resolved record from that interaction. And just like that, all the weirdness, all the spookiness, it just disappears.
Okay, what about the ancient debate, free will versus determinism?
Are our choices real, or is everything predetermined? Well, this model says they're not enemies. It's kind of like this. Imagine the universe is a video game. The rules of the game, the physics, the code, they're totally fixed. That's your determinism. But you are the player, the infinite gamer, making a unique series of choices in every single playthrough. That's your free will. Every time you play, it's a genuine, unique act of engagement. So you see, the rules can be determined, but your path through them is still genuinely your own.
So this is a really cool way to think about the cosmos. But what does any of this have to do with you? With your own direct personal experience of being alive right now? Let's bring this whole idea down from the stars and make it personal.
We all live our lives in this thing we call the now moment. But what is that, really? It's not just a point on a timeline. The now is something much more incredible. It's the active living boundary, the very edge, where all the infinite potentials of the universe collapse and resolve into the one single actual experience you are having. And it happens through your interaction.
And that leads us to consciousness itself. What if it's not something you have, like a little ghost driving your body? What if consciousness is a verb too? What if it's the function of awareness, the active process of participating in reality, the very thing that structures all that raw potential into the coherent, stable experience you call right now?
And if you put all that together, it leads to a pretty mind-blowing conclusion. You aren't just a tiny speck living inside a giant, pre-existing universe. You are an active participant. In fact, you are the very interface through which the universe's raw potential becomes real, becomes known, becomes itself.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If your very experience is the process of reality structuring itself, then what does that say about where you put your attention? What does it say about your choices? What new patterns, what new realities could you yourself help create?